I say to people, my journey to this place started because I lied to myself for 4 years. And I told myself, you're great. You're beautiful. No one can like fit in your shoes. All these like affirmations that I just could not believe at the time until one day I turned around 4 years later and I was there. And those were all my truths. I manifested them by believing them. Hey, girl.
Okay, so I'm so excited to do this. And before we start, well, I guess as we're starting, I do want to tell everyone like just kind of like how we met and like what happened. So, you know, my friend and I, Alex and I, we walked in and literally the whole like hours before we're talking about the podcast, we're talking about my blog and just kind of like the energy and like message we want to put out there. And then we go to have lunch at 232 Bleecker and you're our server. And it's like inexplainable, just like our energies, just I don't know, or maybe this is how it is with you, with everyone, but I just felt like our energies matched and you just made the whole experience.
Well,
and yeah, and I mean, you briefly went into your story a little bit, you know, while we're at lunch, but I mean, really, I was just like so mesmerized by your spirit, your energy, and just your warmth, and I really wanted to dive into your story and get to just know you better. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for finding intrigue in my story.
Yes.
Which is something that I think you were really honest and transparent about how much you love and appreciate people's existences and what they have to offer and how everyone's story deserves to be heard, no matter how nuanced or unimportant they might think their lives are. It's important that we receive their history. Yeah. So I appreciate that. And I'm here.
Yes.
I've arrived.
You arrived. Okay, well, so let's start from, well, okay, so actually, can you answer this question? Do you have that vibe with everyone?
I think that it is like a superpower of mine where I can get a complete stranger to want to tell me everything about them. And I think that I've worked really hard to be the kind of person that I would want to run into on the street.
Oh, I love that.
So I think oftentimes I do make really good connections, immediate sparky connections with people, but it's never something that I think I'm actively doing. I do think that it's just a part of who I am. Yeah. Like my special superpower that God gave me.
Right. And that's been like that since you were kids for as long as you can remember?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid who was like on the beach because I grew up in Puerto Rico. Oh no, I was on the beach and I would make like random friends, and I'd always be kind of scared at first. I like to call myself a shy extrovert. I'm always kind of like cautious at first and nervous at first, and then I don't know. I think I've kind of turned that sensibility into my talent as a performer, and being in like New York City nightlife specifically, so much about that is connecting with new people. Right. And so I feel like I turn on the same approaches that I have as a performer when I'm either bartending or serving or hosting or whatever it is. I immediately feel like it's necessary to make people feel comfortable.
But do you feel like you ever draw in the wrong person or like...
All the time. All the time. But you know what it is? Yeah. It's never when it's platonic. I only draw in the worst men.
Okay, gotcha.
Romantically, I get men who have mommy issues and men who lack a certain level of development, men who pretend that they are one thing because they see greatness in me, or at least I think that may be what it is. They see something great in me, and so they really want to believe that they can match that. And so I get a lot of dream sellers.
So why do you think that is? With like platonically, it's fine, but do you think there's more at stake because it's like romantic?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think people get really nervous and racked up when it comes to love and romance, and in reality, like, we're on a date right now. Yeah. Everything we do as friends, the only difference is I'm having sex with this person. That's literally the difference. Right, and that we do maybe special things for each other that a regular friend wouldn't.
So who are you attracted to romantically, or like?
I mean, These days, billionaires and stars and celebrities. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have like a type. I feel like sometimes people get really wrapped up in type, but
What
I've
about
dated.
like energy-wise?
Oh, I mean, energy-wise, I want to date people like me, but that's really hard. And that's not even like to toot my own horn, but like all of my closest friends share a lot of similarities with me, and I've dated men who are really similar to me, and then it doesn't work. Like, for example, an ex of mine who shall go unnamed, but an ex of mine, we were a little too similar, but I found that a lot of the things that made us similar were coming from different places. While for me, it was a lot of introspection. I found that for him, it was a lot of insecurity. So like my sense of humor or my boisterous energy and my attitude, these things that I've kind of curated as branding for myself and almost, I don't know, sociological performance. For him, I felt were sometimes a little more put on. And even though we were very similar, we didn't end up working out. And then I've dated men who were the complete opposite of me, who are like total introverts, who don't go anywhere, who don't have many friends, who aren't on social media much. And that's great too.
But you don't love that.
But I don't know what I love anymore. I've tried so many different things. And at this point, I just know that I need partners to be thoughtful and kind and generous of spirit. I feel like the energies that I like in partners are like paternal, maternal kindness things that we should all be showing each other as friends or lovers. And not a lot of people know how to do that.
Okay, so you are really good at doing that. Why do you think it is so hard for people to do that? Or where does your nurturing maternal side come from? Like, what fuels that?
I mean, I think I was really close with my mom. Super, super close. And my mom was an incredible mother. And she used to say all the time that she was a big cuddler until she had me, and then the only person she wanted to cuddle was me. So me and my mom were super close, and I learned a lot about how to be a good woman, a good wife, a good person, a good friend, a good daughter from her, primarily. And so I think a lot of that comes from her, and she passed away when I was 14, and so I think that a lot of the reason that I have to be who I am is to make her proud. And, you know, I am her legacy. When I'm with my mom's side of the family, they're always like, oh my God, you're so much like her. Everything about you is so much like her. So knowing that, I feel like I have this, I don't know, calling to walk in her footsteps and do it well. I think people have a really hard time with that kind of energy because they don't do enough introspection, because maybe they're really scared of what they'll find. I think a lot of people get incredibly insecure around other people. While me, I mean, I only recently have been feeling really insecure around people, but more than anything, I'm always like, well, I know what I have to offer. I know what I bring to the table. I know that I'm great. I can tell myself that every day. And I think that's kind of where it starts. I say to people, my journey to this place started because I lied to myself for 4 years. And I told myself, you're great. You're beautiful. No one can like fit in your shoes. All these like affirmations that I just could not believe at the time until one day I turned around 4 years later and I was there. And those were all my truths. I manifested them by believing them. And even though those like kernels were always in there, it took some time for them to marinate and grow and blossom, and they're still blossoming.
So, you know, you mentioned introspection twice, and I feel like people are usually introspective when something happens, and that it like forces them to either be introspective or, like you said, some people are too afraid to do it. Was there something in your life that caused you to look within yourself more deeply?
I think we all have crossroads that we reach. We all have traumas. They can be small, they can be big, but I think when you reach them, you are always drawn to make certain decisions, and that's happened to me several times in my life. Obviously, the biggest one would probably be losing my mom at such a young age, and then I moved with my dad. That was another one, and then deciding what I wanted to go to college for. There are all these little things, but as opposed to holding yourself to some standard or some goal that you have. I've always just accepted that the universe is going to give me what it's going to give me, and I'll take it. I'll be grateful for anything. And so...
But doesn't that feel like a loss of control, though, or like what would like motivate someone?
What do we have that's in our control? The world is falling apart, literally before our very eyes. Politically, culturally, you know, the health of the entire planet, everything is falling apart. So to think that we're gonna miraculously have control over something is absurd. I think I read this quote one time that was like, the only thing that we really have control over as human beings is whether or not we take our own life. That's the only thing you have control over. You don't really have control over your health because there are little bacteria and germs floating everywhere. You don't have control over your money flow because something could crash at any moment. You literally only have control over how you choose to react to the world around you and what you're going to do with your life. And so I find that to give myself a sense of control, I try to just harvest different flowers in my garden of life. Whether that was going to school for theater, which has set me up with the music industry that I've worked in, which has set me up when I've, you know, been in front of a camera as a model. There's so many things that I've done that I owe to the fact that I planted that seed as a performer in theater. Or being open-minded about what I want in a partner. Being open-minded in that has led me to date so many men from so many different backgrounds, and I've learned from every single one of them, good and bad. So I feel like the little bit of control you can have is to give that form of what the universe could give you, the vessel, a little shape. But other than that, just take what you can and then spin gold out of it.
Right. I do want to ask about when your mom passed away, because obviously she was such a big part of your life. How did you process that as a 14-year-old?
I don't think I did at 14. I don't think I started really processing it until I was well into my adulthood. When I was 14, my little brother was about 6 years old when she passed away, and it was a freak accident at her job. No one knew that this was going to happen. And I remember being the person to explain to my little brother how death worked and what that meant, and that mom wasn't coming home.
Well, how did you explain it to him?
I was just very matter of fact. I think that people get wrapped up in talking to kids in ways that they think they're not going to understand things, as opposed to being straightforward with them. And he was like, okay, got it. And it sucked for years, and it's still very bad, and I mourn her every day. But I think at 14, I was too busy trying to be strong and trying to get through 9th grade and trying to adjust to my life without her, and trying to deny the fact that maybe I was more depressed than I knew I was, because I had, even at 14, I had an image in my head of who I was and how I was and how I should behave and what people expected of me. I mean, I think same thing today, which is strength and consistency and intellectuality and kindness, and I didn't have time to have an emotional outburst except to the people closest to me, because I was pretty shitty to like my aunt, who I loved to death, and I apologized about it years later, being like, I'm sorry that I was so mean to you at one point. But truth of the matter is, I just felt like, well, I have school to finish and life goes on and the seasons are going to keep changing.
Right.
So while being strong, I didn't give myself time to process as a kid. And I think it probably started when I went to performing arts high school. And I think that's where I started being tasked with developing a coping mechanism and tasked with understanding why I felt the way I felt, or what was I holding in me.
To channel that in your performance?
Yeah. And to think about it as a teenager in school, writing other people's stories, because so much of what we do as performers and theater creators is fleshing out other people's stories. Why does this person behave this way? Why do they do that? What is the root cause of XYZ? So after you've done it so much for a bunch of other characters, you have to start asking yourself those questions. Why do you behave that way? Why do you do this? Why do you react that way?
And what were the answers?
I mean, so much of it had to do with the fact, later on, as I kept asking myself that, it had to do with accepting that it was a traumatic event. And I think that we don't want to be victims as people. And
well, some people I feel like love being
well,
the victim.
we love playing the victim, but we don't. When we're really victims, no one actually wants to be a victim because people want to play the victim when it's bullshit, but nobody wants to come to their parents and say I was sexually assaulted. You know what I mean? No one wants to be the real victim of a situation because it paints a certain picture about us. And so at 14, I didn't want to be the victim. And at 20, I didn't want to be the victim. At 25, I didn't want to be the victim. I don't want to be the victim today.
Right.
But I think when I started accepting the fact that I had a traumatic event happen to me at 14, which was losing my mom. And then a year later, I moved in with my dad, who lived in Connecticut. My little brother stayed behind. That's another traumatic event. Everything about my world shifted, and my father lied to me about a lot of things, manipulated a lot of things in that conversation that he had with me in order to get me to go move in with him. And those 2.5 or 3 years that I lived with him, that was another traumatic event. Initially moving to New York and a relatively poor kid going to a great college, went to a liberal arts college, Marymount Manhattan, but predominantly white school. That was potentially a traumatic shift as well. All these little things, these survival things, these things I didn't have, all these traumatic shifts in my life.
Yeah.
And until you start accepting them for what they are, you can't heal, you can't process, you can't do the work.
Right.
So I felt like I was kind of doing little tasks, but not ever finishing the project of what mourning my mother was.
Yeah, and I would love to kind of dive into what the work is, because I think that really is important, and that's often I think what's like we overlook or kind of graze by, but it is important to your point of like the work is what helps you heal and helps you get through it, and hopefully on the other side of things you're different or you're better and all of that. So I guess kind of for you doing all of this work, like what does that exactly look like or mean?
I think work for me is gratitude. I try to practice gratitude every day, and that's hard fucking work. It's something that I think a lot of people forget is something we need to do. I say that's work. I say trying to live up to who I know my mother wanted me to be. That's work. And I think that's a reason why a lot of people get caught up in things or become addicted to certain things. We don't want to do that part of the job. How can I be this great person when this person's not around to vindicate or validate that?
Right.
I think I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of talking about it. I haven't talked about it in a while explicitly, but I know when I first started my cabaret work, I really delved into it. So I feel like talking about it is important, and being honest in your reflection about it, not shying away from the memories that you have or cutting things off and trying to move on from them. Mourning, I think, is a lifelong thing, and you never get to that 5th step of acceptance, in my opinion. Like, you do because you know they're gone, but something that was really helpful for me in my day-to-day practice of being alive is recognizing that those 5 steps of grief are always going to be shuffled. One day you might be at anger, the next day you might be at bartering, another day you might be at acceptance, another day you're going to be back to anger, another day you're going to be at denial. There's nothing that you can do. It'll never be chronological.
Yeah. What were the moments that brought you joy or happiness? Like when do you remember in those times?
I think that's the thing that we always get told when someone passes away is like, oh, well, think about the good times. But they're hard to think about because I think that when you try to think about the good times, they just make you sad because you don't have them anymore.
Right, because that's what you miss.
Yeah, and I think for me, the good memories that like smack me across the face every now and then are always by surprise. I so rarely reflect on these things and think about like, oh, what about that joyous thing?
Right.
But I'd say like I think about my mom telling me that my little brother was coming because she was pregnant, and I was so upset about it. I was sitting on the park bench crying, and then a bunch of little schoolgirls came and were like, why are you crying? And my mom was like, well, her little brother's going to be born soon, and she doesn't want to have a little brother. And all the little kids were like, you're going to love it. Having a little brother is the best thing in the world. You don't have to worry about having a sibling. And I was like, okay. And it made me feel better. I think about my mom. We were sweeping outside on our porch one time and listening to Amy Winehouse. She loved Amy Winehouse. So whenever I hear, what's that song? Oh, why am I forgetting? Tears Right on Their Own. I think about my mom. And that's like a great memory that I have. So I have these like little things that will come to mind. But good things, I don't know. I think that we reflect on more negative things more than anything because we don't want to spoil good memories by reacting to them negatively.
You mean about your mom?
Yeah, about my mom especially. But also, like, I don't know. I try to think about her as an essence, as if she's still here, as opposed to like reflect on this like past thing. Because I do feel her. I feel her everywhere,
right,
all the time.
Right. What is it like? It's because it's interesting because I think hard things can be the fire that like shapes us into that gem that that is really in all of us, but that's not the case for everyone, because sometimes that's also the fire that burns you, and it's hard to come back from, and it's interesting because I think it's hard to tell like who's going to be who would actually recover from hard things or kind of like get past through the hard things and like build resilience, and obviously everyone their own timeline, but like it just seems like from your story there has been a lot of hard things kind of with your mom passing away, your father, and then like living moving to New York, and it's just a lot of hardness, and it's like, how could a person not be hardened by such hard circumstances,
Yeah, I mean, don't get it wrong. I am a bitch. I am a bitch, and I do have, like, the things about me that are not great, and things that, like, have ruined friendships of mine. And I'll be the first person to admit that, like, I am no saint, and I have my things that I work on every day. And I think that ultimately it comes down to this like bell hooks quote that I read one time, which was all about rage. And it's specifically talking about like black rage. What do black people feel when we're being treated in the way that we're treated by society? And it's a rage. But you are responsible as far as what you do with that rage. How do you activate that rage? Do you allow it to turn into anger and be physical and be violent? Or do you allow it to politicize you and turn you into something that motivates the people around you and the culture and the work that you're doing? So I feel like for me, the hardships that I've faced and the friends that I've lost and the situations that I have faced in my life, I've made the decision to allow them to activate me and activate my work and have an honest conversation with myself when these things do happen, where I can say to myself, well, you were really shitty when you acted this way or you behaved this way. What could you have done differently?
Well, that's what I mean, though. Like, I'm not to say, like, of course, like, you're human, too, and, that we all have our flaws, but it's just, like, even that, to be able to say, oh, like, that wasn't good. Like, that's not who I could be, And maybe it goes back to your point of just saying, like, it's just the willingness to confront those not so good sides of us or the bright sides of us. But I am curious to learn about just, like, what your day-to-day, like, what is do you have a routine, or like, they say, like,
routine is
successful
so
people
bad.
wake up at 5 a.m. and they do a workout, they do this.
No, I'm not like that at all.
What's your routine?
I try to sleep a lot because I don't sleep enough. Like, I find that I'll do these long weeks of like back-to-back bookings and being at work and doing this and doing that and this shoot and that event and this event. And then one day I'll have like 2 weeks of maybe 3 things that I have to do that week. And then I just sleep. I sleep a lot. I like to do a lot of yoga, but I don't do it enough. Like, I'm currently not in my yoga head, but when I am, I'm at my best. Sometimes I like to sleep with like Tibetan singing bowls on in the background. I do a lot of prayer and a lot of meditation. I take care of my skin. That's a part of my routine.
I was going to say, your skin is like glowing.
Thank you. I love to take care of my skin. I love to take care of my hair. Hot showers. I think that I pamper myself is how I like keep myself sane.
It's so funny. This other podcast I recorded with one of my really good friends, and she talked about her mindset, and she's always been so good about like boundaries and, you know, self-care, you know, even that word is like so overused now, but same thing. She's like, just take a shower. Just take a nap. Just like close your eyes.
Yeah. I sleep a lot. I don't know. I mean, but the other thing for me is like part of my routine is saying yes to any opportunity. So to me, when I have a routine, I lose my mind. So I sometimes prefer to be on my feet and not sure about what's going to happen next and excited about how life is going to shake something up for me on any given day.
You know, okay, so it seems like, I mean, there obviously we all have our philosophies of life, but like when you're old and it's your time to go, like I guess when you're looking forward to that, like how do you want to say you lived your life? Like I want to live my life like this or something.
I mean, I tell people that I want to live my life always trying to see the good in something. I think that we live in a society where all we want to do is talk shit about something. We want to break something down. We want to attack this person and attack that person or break this film apart and tear apart this record. And to me, when I was a theater critic for a while, I said to myself, well, I don't want to be that person. Even though my job is to tell you that you're good or bad, I still want to access that part of me as an artist that says, well, someone put their heart and their soul into this, so there's got to be something good to say about it, no matter what it is. So in my life, yeah, I guess I want to have lived a life where I see the good in things and I never lose sight of gratitude and acceptance that I'm doing good and I'm doing all right and that I could be doing much worse. And love is at the center of a lot for me. Even when there's a Stevie Wonder quote that I love, which is like, even in moments of anger, find words of love. And that has carried me through many a tough conversation with platonic friends and romantic partners, where people are very surprised about my ability to just have a conversation with them when I'm upset about something. And I'm like, why get impassioned? Why get rageful?
How do you do that?
I don't know. Because to me, it's not effective. It's not effective to like...
You're like, oh, what's the point of getting so upset? It's like not helpful.
Yeah, like to me, I think that I'm like a solutions person. So when I'm upset with somebody about something, I will take a day or two to think about like why I'm upset about it and then try and find a good time for both people and talk about it. And sometimes that really catches people off guard. Like the last guy I was dating, last conversation we had, it was because he sent me some bullshit message on Instagram with some woman saying something on there about how there aren't enough men in this world, and so women need to just accept the fact that we need to share a man.
Oh my God.
And I was like, why would you send me this? And on top of that, like we were having communication issues and he was really distant and I wasn't seeing him enough and just all these things. And I was like, so now you're planting a seed in my head that you're seeing other women behind my back, which you don't have to be because I'm not your girlfriend. We're literally just dating. So if that's what you want to do, you can do that. But like, don't go about it in this way. So it made me really upset, and I'm very petty and vindictive. So I also sent back some memes that were very petty. And then like 48 hours later or like 3 days later, he messages me all day being like, oh, you're on my mind. I hope you're okay. Oh, this, oh, that, oh, blah, blah, blah. And so inevitably I call him after work and I said to him, hey, so I kind of want to talk to you. I was like, are you by yourself? Was my first question. He seemed peeved by that question. Men are weird. Men are very weird.
Because you meant it not in the way that he's thinking.
Yeah, I'm not saying, is there another woman in your house? I'm saying, are you around anybody? Do you have any company? Do you have time to talk? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go to my room. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what's happening. And he got very upset. And then he felt away about it. He's like, I told you I can only date one woman at a time. And I'm like, okay, but like that's not really what I'm trying to say to you. What I'm trying to say to you is I've seen someone else messaging you and calling you at hours that I would deem are inappropriate. So, and I know you have history with this person. So if she's in the picture somehow, let me know. Don't like not tell me and then be distant with me. And I don't know. I even said at the end of the conversation, I was like, your tone is not cool, but it seems like what you're okay with ending this conversation as. So I'm going to let it be, and I'll talk to you when you decide to speak to me. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then we haven't spoken again. But that's just kind of, I don't know. I want to be effective. When I communicate with people, I want to be effective. I don't believe in this need to be impassioned and rageful and all these things I need to get out on my partner. That's not my partner's water to hold. That's mine. Right. If I'm that upset, I need to do what I need to do for myself to let that out and then have an effective conversation with my partner that will lead to us continuing to have a relationship.
Right.
And I think that that's the thing that people sometimes lose sight on is they're like, well, you made me feel this way, so now you have to know that you made me feel this way. Deal with the brunt of me unleashing on you.
This conversation may be very timely because I'm going to have a call after this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need to maybe just like keep it to myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's like important, like I said, use words of love. And remember that like the root of why you're upset is because you care about that person. So if you want it to survive and work, then in my opinion, you have to really come to the table and say, this is how I'm feeling. I'm aware of what you're doing. If I'm doing something, please bring it to my attention. How can we solve this? Everything in my head is a business meeting. How can we solve it? What can we do about it? Because I love you and I care about you. And I don't want to lose us continuing to explore this opportunity just because I'm upset about something. As Queen Petty, I would say don't be petty about it. But I'm a big teacher too. Teach him, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also at a point where I'm like, for what?
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah, what am I teaching this person
I
for?
used to say this thing where I'd be like, well, I want to leave him better for the next girl. And now I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah, no.
I don't, because I don't think that...
It's not my job. It's not your job.
But not only that, but I also think, like, they know that they're wrong. You know what I mean? Like, and oftentimes it doesn't matter what I tell you.
They already feel
You're going to make the decision to behave, react, and say what you say when you want it on your time. The day that you decide to be a really good partner to somebody is not going to be with me, clearly. So what are we going to do? I'm going to tell you how to be a better partner to another woman? Fine. But, like, if anything, you should learn that lesson beyond me. I shouldn't have to be your PowerPoint teacher. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that when you go into conversations about things or people that have hurt your feelings, it's important to go into the room knowing your worth and knowing that you care about yourself and behaving as such.
Right.
And so...
And I think part of that, too, is, like, knowing, like, you can't change people. People can only change themselves. And either it's, like, you accept and say, I'm going to be a part of this, or you just walk away. Yeah.
Like, to me, I've worked way too hard at maintaining integrity in conversation to be spoken to in a way that I do not accept. And I think that we, especially as women, have to learn to figure out what we tolerate and what we don't tolerate. Especially in a world that babies them and expects us to be big and grown and this bigger person all the fucking time. So what do I tolerate? What is there to argue about?
So, you know, when we met, you did share with me about, you know, transitioning, and I did want to ask you about that. And we can go into as much as you want to and not want to. And it was hilarious because you just like said it so matter of fact in the conversation. It's like, what do you mean by transitioning?
Yeah. And I remember that. I mean, I'm at a point in my transition in my life where like a lot of people have no idea that I'm trans, and then I'll say it and they'll be like, oh.
No, because we were talking and you're just like saying, like you're telling your story and then like, oh, and then this transition happened. And it sounded like a transition in your life, like you would,
Well, I think that people, if I'm being like totally transparent, I think that people need to like, I don't know, like it's just like, well, that person's trans, or that person's Asian, or that person's black, or that person's gay, this person's that. Like, to me, I don't really talk about it as this like big thing.
Sure.
Because I don't, and it doesn't like.
It's not your entire identity.
It's not my entire identity. And truth of the matter is, I'm at a point in my transition where it doesn't even affect a lot of how I live my life. And I'm very privileged when I say that. There are a lot of girls out here who do not have that privilege, who doesn't matter how long they've been on hormones or how long they've been exploring this or that, they just haven't reached a place where that's their reality. But to me, that's my reality.
Yeah.
So I started transitioning around like 23, 24. And it was the glory and the highlight of my life to start exploring those things. And I would say that when I started transitioning and being aware of, well, not being aware, but reclaiming, which is, I think, something that all women need to be doing, reclaiming femininity and reclaiming softness and not feeling like those things are to our detriment, or
Some
that
beautiful things about us,
or that they are to the benefit of anybody else.
Right.
Softness and femininity and girliness and womanhood, these things that so many women, whether you're trans, whether you're cis, straight, queer, it doesn't matter. There are these things that we're told we should be ashamed of, or that we're not doing right, or that we should be leaning into them this way but not this way. And so when I started really reclaiming those things in myself, I felt so liberated and so free. And then I turned 25, which I think is the story I was telling you. And I was in Amsterdam, 6 hours ahead, very high on something called strawberry Skittles. And I said to my best friend sitting across from me, I was like, I feel like I'm in the future. I feel like I'm ahead of myself. And she was like, what are you talking
Definitely
about?
high.
Yeah, high as hell. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I just feel like it's 6 hours ahead. So it's not really my birthday, but it's my birthday. And I'm having like a paradoxical introspection. And she was like, okay. And I just started telling her, like, I used to tell people I'm very witchy. My family's full of like very witchy, intuitive, spiritual women. It's always been a thing. And I always used to tell people I'm not going to be very successful at what I do as an artist until I'm around 25. I've worked more in the last 2 years of my life than the 20 that I've been working. And that I would probably die young. I used to always say I'm probably going to die young. I can't really see past like 25. And then I transitioned and I was like, well, this is why you couldn't see it. Because you weren't in this space and in this body and in this experience that you're in now, because you denied it of yourself for a really long time.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about, talk to you about, is really understand the internal experience of that. Because I think, like, you know, obviously, like nowadays, like trans community is getting a lot of, you know, media attention and lots of exposure to that community. But I think for me personally, it's like I can empathize with the, you know, the fact of like not feeling like you're who you're supposed to be. But I think it's really, I guess I don't understand, like, what is that feeling like of, I can imagine for myself thinking like I'm supposed to be another gender. Like I don't even know what that's supposed to even feel like.
But I also think that the thing about that is that there is no monolithic experience of transness. There's no monolithic experience of blackness, of Latinxness, of cisness. There's no monolithic experience. So
I love that you said that.
What I can say is, like, for me and in my experience, it's the difference between wanting, I always tell people, it's like, when I don't feel good about myself, I want to rip the skin off of my own face. It's terrible. And I get very anxious and I get very scared to go outside, and my skin crawls and I feel very grossed out with myself. And the difference really is that when we are aligned in our gender or identity, we're existing in a very euphoric place, a place where we don't have to question anything or worry about anything, or if this person's staring at me for this, or this person's talking to me funny for this, I'm just existing.
Yeah.
Which is something that I think cis people don't typically even think about, because we're usually in a constant state of euphoria. for lack of better words. You're not really thinking about your gender as this detriment to who you are, because it's not affecting your spiritual center.
But that's a little bit hard to understand because there's so many steps that are taken, like really difficult steps taken to embody that gender.
Well, but also there's steps that we take from a modern perspective, because trans people have existed since the ancient Greeks, since Native Americans. Trans people have always existed. And at one point in time, these people were prophets, and they were worshipped, and they were seen as people who understood something that the common man or woman didn't get, because we existed in this either intersectional space or we transcend whatever that might be. And I think that in the modern sense, we've conflated trans joy with passing, when there are plenty of trans people who don't ever get any surgery, they don't ever go on hormones, they just exist however they exist, and they're perfectly happy. So the reason that is because for a trans person, there's like a sliding scale of something called dysphoria. Dysphoria being the opposite of that euphoria. Most people exist with a constant hum of dysphoria until certain things are fixed, whether that's, say, I don't know, top surgery for trans men, or facial hair removal for trans women. All these little things that can be tweaked.
That's dysphoria?
That's dysphoric. Those are the things that trigger that anxiety, that create that dysphoric situation.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so just so I think I'm following with what you're saying. You're saying dysphoria is so like some people who, not all people, but some people who do take these steps to, like you said, facial hair or chest surgery, it's because they're in, like, that's a trigger.
It's trigger for the dysphoria. So the thing that would make a cis woman so happy to wake up with every day is the thing that would cause a trans man
What's a cis woman?
A cis woman. So cis is a scientific and sociopolitical term for someone who identifies with the sex that they were assigned at birth, the gender they were assigned at birth.
Okay.
So the opposite of
woman.
trans. You're cis, I'm trans.
Okay.
So and sometimes people have like really weird reactions to that word, but it's literally just a word that's existed since the 90s to identify people.
Well, I mean, I couldn't tell if you were saying cis like CYST or cis
no, CIS.
SIS. Yeah.
CIS. And so they're just two terms. So things that a cis person might wake up with happy to have because it allows them to navigate the world, there are things that cause and trigger dysphoria in a lot of trans people. And I think that the thing that people either leave out of the conversation or don't really realize is that we're all performing gender. Cis people are performing gender every day. Every single day. And it's not that you are trying to validate one thing over the other, but rather to say that this is how you feel like your best self as a woman. To me, I'm very well aware that my body does not operate or do the same things that your body might do and operate as. But I'm also aware that when I walk out into the world and I perform my gender that brings me peace and joy is the same way that you wake up and choose to operate in your gender that brings you peace and joy. So if you were to wake up tomorrow and say, I don't want to be a feminine creature of the earth, I want to be a masculine creature of the earth, you'd be treated very differently. And you'd have to take certain measures. But if those are the things that would make you comfortable, then truth be told, the world is going to work around how you perform your gender. It's literal like social science. It's just what we do. Everyone's born naked and everyone's born blabbering and not having any words. And we choose to give words and whatever we do, how we dress, how we perform, the amount of weight that we do.
I think I am following what you're saying in terms of that experience. It's almost like it's like it's too black and white to just say like man, woman, like female, male. It's like this gray space we all
exist in.
Yeah.
And we all just kind of one day realize that that's how we choose to operate.
Yeah, and how society imposes certain like ways of being on us, like you saying, like, oh, we perform a certain way. Because I have very distinct memories, even in high school, where I grew up like loving to play with Legos and like video games and stuff, but I found that like girls my age like weren't interested in that anymore. At least it was shifting, and they were really interested in boys and all that. Like, I would be boy crazy too and have crushes, but I'm like, I really want to play like video games.
Yeah, I
want to
do other things.
But I was always afraid or hesitant to do that because then I have to go play with the boys, and then what do people say? Ooh, you like him? It's just like, I just want to play video games.
I just want to do what I do.
Yeah.
I think that the feeling all in all though is like, I always have to wake up and I question these little things about myself that like the people around me don't ever question. And there's stupid things, or like things about my face, or things about my body, or things about this or that. And my friends will be like, what are you talking about? And so that's where I find like the mental or psychological component of transness versus, you know, someone who is not trans, where that kind of plays in, where we're questioning these things about our bodies because scientifically they've already noticed that like the brain of a trans person is significantly different than the brain of someone who is cis and is operating that way and choosing
What
that way.
about it is different?
Like they say that a trans woman's brain, scientifically they've noticed, typically aligns more with the brain patterns of a cis woman than it would for a cis man, despite the fact that all trans women are being told all the time is that they're men. So like, and they try to bring up science, they try to bring this up and that up. When in reality, like, we literally only know about the double helix DNA since like 1996 or 1999. So like, all this like high school biology shit that people try to talk about to disprove transness and its reality and its historical reality is BS. It has its truth and it has its things that even I sometimes I'm like, like for me, I identify more as like non-binary than a traditional trans person. So
What
I
is
don't.
that?
Non-binary is when you kind of feel like you're outside of male or female.
Okay.
So to me, like I just feel like my best self. I don't really want to be like this woman or that man or this person or that person. I want to be my best self.
I don't want to water this down, but maybe just to help me understand, maybe other people to understand too. Is it almost like in like religion, like you're agnostic kind of?
I like to describe it more using like colors.
Okay.
So like I like to say that I'm more purple than I am red or blue. Or like I'm more of a like 1.75 between a boy and a girl than like a 2.0. It's just like not, I don't really feel.
There's no hard lines. Or
Yeah,
hard
I feel like
boundaries.
pi. I'm infinite. And my gender is infinite. And how I choose to acknowledge that and nurture that is infinite. But I know that if there was something that I identify with, it's women and womanness, and I have my entire life. I used to say when I was a kid, before I even knew about transness or that I could be that, people would be like, oh, you want to be a girl so bad, and I'd be like, I don't know about that, but I do know that I'm a lady. I used to call myself a lady my whole life. And to this day, I feel that way. So I know that for me and cis women, are we identical? No. But do the same men that want to sleep with you want to sleep with me? Probably. And do I know that when I go out into the world and I get catcalled, it's the same reasons you get catcalled? Absolutely. But I know that I wouldn't say that we walk the same existence, but I would say that we walk incredibly parallel lives. I say that we're on the same highway in different lanes, truly and honestly.
Yes, everybody.
I do
Everybody,
too.
yeah.
But I think sometimes, like I've been saying to people since transitioning, I get so much more shit from cis women than I do from men.
What do you mean?
Like, girls just feel a way about trans girls.
Girls feel a way about all
all
the
girls,
yeah.
But they especially feel a way about trans girls. And it's like very violent and it's very mean and it's very aggressive. And
Why is that?
I don't know. I feel like because we exist in a world where the only thing that women feel like they have is to be a woman. And so it's like, oh, well, why would you take this one thing from me? When in reality, like, no one's taking that from you. And if anything, it's not going to make my life any fucking easier at all.
Yeah, right,
so
right.
I don't know. I think that people are
bizarre.
scared about the things that they don't know.
Yeah.
They're scared about the things that they feel maybe threaten them or that make them question certain things. But I know that for me, I've I sometimes have to like take a step back and think like, well, what women can I trust with this information versus others?
Sure.
Because there's this really weird pattern of women being totally fine with you being trans until like, say a friend of hers is like, oh, she's really hot. Can I have her number? And it's like, oh, well, you know, she's trans. There are these like little like ways that
just me so upset.
It's crazy,
so
and it's crazy, and it's unnecessary, and I don't know why we do it, but I wish we would stop.
Yeah, I think, you know what, that's just like, I feel it's everywhere. I mean, again, not to like, sorry, I feel like I'm like trivializing or like watering things down. I'm not trying to do that, but I think it's that, hearing that just makes me think like, it's that mindset of there's not enough to go around.
Right,
or
it's like this competitive thing that like women have, when in reality, like, it's so unnecessary. Yeah. If he wants you, he wants you. And he'll choose you, and it'll be great, and everything will be fine. And if he doesn't, then what are you going to do about it? You denying another woman's connection or experience doesn't allow you to gain any more than her.
I think sometimes we don't realize we do that to ourselves. Like, I'm sure these women or these people in general, they're not conscious that that's what they're doing.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Because there also are people who are very conscious.
Yes, of course, yes.
You know what I mean? But I like to think so, and I like to hope, and I know that the majority of people don't care, and they're perfectly happy, and they want to support each other, and the world is a great place. But I think that right now we're existing in a time where something that has been so niche and so quiet is stirring up a lot of conversation, and sometimes not with the right resources, and sometimes not the right people are having the conversation. I always say all the time, like, well, you guys can talk about transness all you want, but like, when's the last time you even met a trans person? Or in my case, like, I run across tons of people who have no idea that I'm trans. Right. So how many other people have you walked in the street that are trans that you haven't
I wouldn't have known unless you told me like, that day. Yeah.
And so, I don't know, it's weird, but it's great. I think that being trans is a blessing. The same way that I think being Black is a blessing and being Latinx is a blessing. I feel closer to God as a trans person. I feel very happy.
Yeah, because I think all of these experiences, all of these things that we feel is kind of like what you said before, like we're all on the same highway, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're all in this, like we all feel these things, you know? And there is a closeness to a higher being or, you know, or being beyond us or spiritual energy. Because we're all kind of embodied or like born
we're connected in some way.
Yes, thank you for being more eloquent about it. Yes,
I mean, I think too, we do a lot of putting ourselves into the conversation when it has nothing to do with us. And so when we accept that, well, she's dealing with that and he's dealing with this and I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with, let's be less nosy.
Right.
You know, like let's stop thinking that everything that someone else does is a reflection on us.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not.
That's something I gotta learn too. Yeah.
Like it's so hard to learn that and to practice that and to activate that.
Yes.
But I think that that's the crux of a lot of people's issues with Blackness or Latinxness or immigrants or Muslims or trans people. It's these things that like, well, I don't understand it. And it feels like a reflection on me, especially because I feel ignorant. And so what am I going to do about that?
Right.
And as opposed to having like an active conversation about how to fix that or go to resources or try to learn more. And I think that's another thing is a lot of people are curious about transness, but because they feel like it's going to have some kind of reflection on them to ask any questions, they don't ask anything.
Right.
And
so
the
thing
they
is,
stay
like,
ignorant.
we've all felt that fear. We've all felt the, oh, I don't know if I should ask or if I should say anything or, you know, it's just we're all in that same boat. And I think, like, our own vessels, like, this body that we have and this experience that we have in this life it's the vessel in which we're experiencing all these different emotions and feelings. But it's like, man, everyone has felt these kinds of things and in their own ways, but in the same way. It's like it is a paradox. Like it's different yet the same time, you know. But I was just gonna say, you know what? Scratch that. I was gonna go into this. Because just like even for me, like growing up being Asian, like I like growing up Asian in where I grew up, where it was predominantly white and not, I mean, I don't want to say white, but it's just one culture. I think when there's more predominantly one or dominantly one culture, it is hard when there are outsiders. You know, that's just human nature. And I used to hate like being Asian because like that's and you know, as a kid I remember thinking like when someone first made fun of me, like
if I could just not be Asian.
No, yeah, but I thought to myself, I was like, I don't get it. Like, what do they mean? Because they'd say something like, "Oh, your face is flat."
Oh yeah,
and I was like looking at them like, I don't
the discovery. I mean, I've been called like a sissy and a faggot my whole life, and my thing about it is, and it's just like the irony of trans existence is, when I lived my life and my existence as a gay man, because that's all I knew, I wasn't man enough. I never would be man enough. I would always be a sissy. I'd always be a faggot. I'd always be this. I'd always be that. I'd never be man enough. And now since transitioning, it's like I'm too much of a man. Everything about me is too masculine. Everything about this or that is like not truly feminine.
Can't
win. Yeah, you can't win. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And so to me, in my existence, I'm like, well, you are correct. I will never be man enough. I'll never be woman enough. I'll be too masculine. I'll be too feminine. Because I am who I am, and it's perfect, and it's divine, and I love it. Yeah. I love that I am more masculine or more feminine than you, and whatever your perspective is, because I'm at peace.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have a lot of rage when they see someone living in their truth and in their peace, because they don't have peace. And I think that, I don't know, maybe sometimes people feel like womanhood can be bought when they see trans people, which is like also false, because...
What do you mean bought?
I don't know. People have this thing where they're like, oh, well, you can get, like the comments you see on trans posts, it's like, well, you can get as many surgeries as you want, you'll never be a woman. It's like, So people will be like, oh,
like it's just like external, like
like it's all external, because people don't recognize that, like that dysphoria thing that we were talking about, this feeling where it's like, I'm just trying to find my peace. It has nothing to do or reflection on you. I'm just trying to exist because I've now recognized these things in myself. And I hate that you grew up and you had this moment of realization in your difference, because I grew up with realizations where like I used to sing Jigglypuff's song from Pokemon in kindergarten. And I was really good at it as a kid, and I realized that kids in kindergarten, they would like get me in the lunch line, older kids, they'd get me to sing it, and they'd be like, oh, and I used to think like it was cool that I was doing this, but now in retrospect, I feel like they were probably teasing me. And it was probably like the root of my awareness that like my love for pink and my love for things that were girly and all these beautiful, incredible things that I loved were also making me a target. These things that I couldn't change.
Yeah.
And
you're not
about
even
myself.
thinking about like that.
Yeah.
Like no one's thinking like, oh, I shouldn't or should. You're like, as a kid, you just
Same
like
thing, like
it.
you're saying, like at the end of the day, like it's my face, and it's not a face that is making me feel any way or another way. It's just my face.
I feel like I've carried that with me though. Where I mean, I love now. I don't we don't get into this, but I love being Asian, who I am now. But I feel like this because that experience of like I don't see what you're so upset about. And sometimes even today, I still have that with different things in my life where I'm like, is someone upset at me? But like, I'm just like not seeing.
Yeah, why are you? I mean, yeah, but I think that's so much though. I think that a lot of us have this blockade where we get angry at people for things that they can't change, or we get upset with them and then don't know how to communicate it, or sometimes it's curiosity, or sometimes it's ignorance, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
In reality, like, I'm just living my life, and I love myself and everything about myself, and I'm sorry that for some reason really affects you the way it affects you.
Well, just to wrap things up, last question is, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, you're depressed, you're traumatized, accept it and do something with it. And that you're gonna live a very happy life, and you're going to be so full of love, and there are going to be so many people that love you. So stop getting in the way of that or making excuses for that, and start telling yourself that you're beautiful now, as opposed to waiting 20 years before you do it.
Wow, I love that. no one's given an answer like that. That's great. Well, that's it. That's a wrap.
That's it. That's a
Yes.
wrap. Oh, we had so
Woo.
much more to talk about.
I know we do. I feel like we just scratched the surface on things.